But let's go ahead and get started because it's right at the top of the hour. Today, our theme is not talking across differences. Today, our theme is gathering feedback. Great ways to collect feedback in meetings. So if you're new to Zoom, go ahead and take a moment to try and get your video working and your microphone. And we're going to test all of that by doing a quick round of introductions. And for today's introduction, I would love to hear your name, where you're joining us from. Hey, there's Tom Flynn. Your name, where you're joining us from, and there should be audio at this point, Rachel. Oh, wait, she can't hear me say that there should be audio. And one area of your work where you need the feedback of your colleagues. So I'm going to go ahead and start while everybody's getting their video turned on. My name's Elise. I am joining from Portland, Oregon. And one place where I need feedback from my colleagues is in setting vision for these kinds of sessions and the meetings we run. Who here is connected technically enough that they'd like to go next?
I am, and you said what you could use help with. I'm sorry, I was trying to help Rachel.
One area in your work where you could use feedback of your peers.
I might have to think. I'm sorry.
All right. John, Keith.
Hello. I'm also in Portland, Oregon. And I'm always looking soliciting feedback around the product strategy and decisions we make along that way.
All right. Amy, how about you?
Hey, hi. I'm Amy Farrell. I'm in Portland, Oregon also. In fact, I am behind John, and we're having to trade off who's muted. Yeah, where could I? The thing is, I don't have a lot of trouble getting feedback from my peers lately. You know, I think just feedback as far as what would be most helpful, or when I do a thing that drives them nuts. Because awesome. I don't hear that, and it's got to happen.
Excellent. Rachel, Tom, Ted, if one of you'd like to go ahead, and Rachel, if you'd like to unmute and go ahead and introduce your name, where you're from, and a place where you can use feedback in your work.
Hi there, I'm Rachel Kenny. I work with the Veterans Health Administration in Denver, and I work in research. And I was particularly intrigued by this topic of getting feedback during meetings because I have worked with some very busy partners, and I think it might be easier for them if we use our meeting time sometimes for them actually to have a focused work as opposed to asking them to do that work outside of the meeting. So I'm interested in what you had to say about that.
Awesome, excellent. Thank you for sharing. Tom, are you able to talk to us?
I think so.
Great.
Tom Flynn calling in from Portland, Oregon, and areas that I appreciate feedback on. Maybe an area that I appreciate feedback on in meetings is that I appreciate letting or people letting me know if we're going too fast or conversely if we're going too slow. I know sometimes people are either impatient or bored, and they get frustrated if somebody in the team is ramping too slowly to a project, and other times it can be where ideas are flowing freely, things are moving quickly, and someone feels like they're either being left behind or not included because they just need more information in order to be up to speed.
All right, thank you. And Ted, are you able to unmute and share with us so who you are, where you're from, and a place where you can use feedback? Ted is mysteriously muted still. So we will.
My name's Ted Davidson. I work for a construction company in Nashville, Tennessee. Currently working on a project in Orlando, and I've been using Lucid Meetings, trying to get a little bit more savvy towards meetings that matter. So I've been using the service for quite some time, and to try to glean any best fit procedures that I need to be using as I still try to learn the system.
Excellent. Welcome, Ted. All right. So with all of that in here, we're going to talk specifically about meeting techniques you can use to get feedback today. And I have a presentation for those of you who aren't on video. I put PDF document of the presentation in the chat. So I will, and I'm going to share my screen for the next part. And we're just going to use this to help facilitate our discussion. So you don't have to be muted. If you want to chime in, feel free to do so, because this is a informal community kind of event. So today's topic is techniques for getting great feedback in meetings. And we're going to look quickly at 6 different techniques that come from different places. To begin with, we'll look at techniques that are good for getting everybody to respond to the same question or the same idea. So if you've got a group and you want all of them to weigh in on the same thing, we'll look at feedback in categories, PALPAR, and accessing the wisdom of your group. And then there are times where you want everybody to have an idea and you want it to get feedback on multiple versions of the same idea all at once. And we'll look at those. So those are techniques we'll talk about there are round robin. This is a Luma version. It's a little different from what you may have used before. Ritual descent and troika. And then troika is a liberating structure, and we'll actually practice or experiment using that one. So with that, let's walk through the first couple real quick. And I'm just going to explain them, and we'll talk about them, and then we'll practice the troika. So feedback in categories is what happens anytime you ask the group a question, and then you say, hey, I want to get a whole bunch of ideas in reply to this question very, very quickly. So you ask the question, and it's wonderful for making sure that you hear from everybody, not just the loudest people, and for getting lots and lots of ideas. And you have copies of this slide so you can read the words later. So how that one works is that you ask the question, and the question we have for practicing this one today is, hey, what did you think about this session? And then you'll say, okay, for example, I want you to give me an example of one thing that you liked, one thing you felt the session lacked, and one thing that you learned while you were here. So liked, lacked, and learned. And then everybody would write one thing in each category and then send that to you. They write them, think about them individually, and everybody shares their answers all at once. So liked, lacked, and learned is one example of feedback in categories. This technique is used often in brainstorming and retrospectives. Does anybody else have examples of where they may have used a technique like this or variations on it that they would be willing to share? No one? Amy, I know for a fact that you have used techniques like, lacked, and learned. What's one of the variations we've used in our retrospectives?
I am remembering a 4-panel grid. It included something along the lines, I forget the exact terms of these were not it. The good and bad were not the words, but that was the effect, were 2 of them. Surprising was one.
Right.
Ideas is the other. And in that format, typically we were letting people either put them up on stickies or shout them out, but it wasn't it wasn't, you know, each person go through and provide one of each of these. It was put your ideas up according to those prompts.
Right. So exactly that kind of idea, certainly in the case of projects where you're not sure how the project is going, start, stop, and continue tend to be very good categories for getting feedback. What should we stop doing on this project? What should we start doing to make our work going? And what's doing well that we would need to make sure we continue? So that's feedback in categories. There are a million variations of how to do this. Simple, fast, effective. All right. The next one is PAL.
Actually, hold on, Elise.
Yeah, Tom.
Before you jump ahead, I think Amy or somebody posted a comment that flew by, and it caught something in my eye. And that was there anything that surprised you? Was there anything that was unexpected? Which is sort of like, what did you learn? But you know, a lot of times when you say like, what did you learn? To me, it feels like I have to be able to regurgitate some huge paradigm shift or some kind of like, you know, I was enlightened by this thing. And sometimes things aren't totally enlightening, but they are, you know, well, wow, that was surprising. That was interesting to me. I'm going to have to think about that more. It's a pondering.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that addition of, you know, what did you like? What was lacking? What did you learn? And maybe was there anything unexpected or surprising for you?
Right.
Yeah,
It's
sometimes surprising will also elicit unexpected in a, you know, teammate did a thing that threw me for a loop kind of way.
Maybe that's not good.
Well, it's good to know. It's always, you know, because often the person didn't realize. So.
Right, and that's certainly a safer question to answer than, hey, what did I hate? You know, I hated that thing you did. Or it's a lot easier to say, I was surprised by this.
Yeah. And along those lines, this is Rachel. I went to a training recently where they had in their parking lot, it was I like, I wish, I wonder. And the I wish was like instead of the feedback. And I was thinking the same thing, that like sometimes it's easier to answer other types of questions about what could be done better.
Absolutely. So feedback in categories, just, you know, this is the one we've been talking about. So this technique, it's really fabulous for breaking up that blank slate problem, but also, you know, helping overcome some of give people a path to say things that they wouldn't otherwise say. So the next technique we're going to talk about is PALPAR. And this one is for those very traditional settings where you're giving a presentation or some big proposal and you do your big slide thing, and then you want feedback from the group. And normally what people do in meetings is they say, here's my big presentation, what do you think? Which doesn't work very well. So this technique is by Rick Lent, and it's designed to take that same thing but tweak it a little bit to make sure you get better feedback. And it works like this. So you present your proposal, you ask, and the presenter needs to decide, very much like when we're getting feedback in categories, specifically which questions they're going to ask in advance. So they ask their questions, and then they ask the group to sit in silence for a minute and think about them. And then the presenter listens to all of the answers without replying at all, right? They just have the answers and the feedback coming back. They pause. So you take as much time as you need as a presenter to absorb what you've heard. Think about your intent for that session. And then there's the little a, you reply. So you say, okay, here's what I heard back. Here's what I'm going to do next. It's a variation on what you're probably already seen done, but with a little bit of time and intentionality intersected to make it a richer experience. It's not that different but it's quite different from this, quite different from this technique, which is also a technique where one person, by Paul Axtell, shares an idea with the group and gets their feedback. But in this case, the person who is gathering the group has a problem they want help with, or some idea that they want to get other people's feedback on. And this one works like this. You take 5 minutes, you explain your problem or your question to the group. The group has 5 minutes to ask you questions about that. And then you, as the person who owns the problem, you shut up and you back away, and the group has 15 minutes to discuss it, and you don't say anything, you just listen. You don't participate. After 15 minutes of the group discussing the issue, there's a quick process check where you say, hey, here's where I could use some more help. Here's what I'm hearing. Can you guys go deeper into this idea that you're thinking about? And then there's another round, another 10 minutes where the group discusses the problem or the challenge you've given them to look at for another 10 minutes. And then finally, the last 5 minutes, the person who has proposed this question or problem tells the group what they've heard and what they're going to do with it next. So it's a great way for you, as someone who has a problem or a challenge you're struggling with, to give yourself permission to just get help and feedback and not have to be presentationally in the middle of all of that. So there's something in both of these cases, the PALPAR, where you have a fixed proposal you're sharing, and the accessing the wisdom of your group, where you have an idea of a problem or a challenge that you're sharing. They have a common characteristic. So what are you noticing that's the same about these two?
The listening.
Right on. The listening. Like they're every single one of these techniques, the feedback in categories, and both of these rely on silence. So there is a moment where you ask the question and then everybody else is quiet. And Rachel, I see in the chat you've asked if the slides will be shared there. I also put a PDF of the slides up in the chat because I thought maybe for folks who couldn't get the video, they might be challenging to get to.
You know,
okay.
Elise, I don't see that. And I think maybe we don't see it if we weren't in chat when you put it there.
Oh, I'll put it in again then. And we'll definitely put it in the recording afterwards too. Okay, so let's keep moving on real quick so that we can get through the next set. So then we're moving into feedback techniques that you're used when everybody's got an idea. This one is called Round Robin. It's from Luma. And this is very much when you're in a space with a group and you're trying to prototype ideas or solutions for something you might do. So you may have 2, 3, 4 different breakout groups, and each group of people is coming up with ways that, like, you might, tackle a project or ideas for an event or something like that. And this particular technique is a written technique. So here's what they do. In round 1, each individual gets a sheet of paper, and the challenge that you're trying to solve is written at the top, and then they write their proposed solution. Then they take that paper and they pass it to the person sitting next to them, and that person writes down all of the ways they think that proposed solution will fail. They're like, okay, yeah, lovely, but that's totally not going to work. And they write that out. Then they fold over the proposed, then they fold it over and they pass it to the next person. And the next person looks at all of the ways that it's going to fail, and they write down, okay, here's how we can solve all of the problems that this other person identified to come up with a solution that will work great, to make this idea awesome. And the reason this technique is so useful is it makes it so that this first idea, let's say, we're going to have a party with kids and horses. And then the next person is like, horses eat everything and there's poop everywhere and it's no good. And the third person is like, yes, but we have a special corral at the park. So by the time you get to, we've got a party with horses in a special corral at the park, it's no longer one person's idea. Every single one of those people has had a hand on making the horse party park a wonderful idea. And this particular technique works really great with folks who don't like to speak in groups. So I did this at a workshop once, and I had one guy who hated it because he liked to talk all the time. And I had 10 people who raised their hands saying every meeting should always work this way. So it was a fascinating experience.
Yeah, I've heard of something similar. I'm trying to look up the name of it, but what they did was they wrote down, like each person got a piece of paper and wrote down all of their ideas about the topic, and then they would put the papers in the middle, and you'd take somebody else's paper and you would mark like what you agreed with, or you'd write what you disagreed with, and then and keep going. So it's similar, but this is interesting, and that it's calling on a third person to develop solutions.
Yeah, yeah, it's those kinds of things are totally fun. You know, the thing where it's not quite, both of these, that one and ritual dissent, which we're going to talk about next, are dealing with proposals that have been rapidly generated in the moment. So ritual dissent, like the Luma round robin, is dealt with in breakout groups, and the breakout group will create a proposal together, and then a representative for that group moves from table to table to table, presenting their ideas where they hear critiques from everybody else in the group. I'm not going to talk about this one in too much detail because it's a technique developed by Cognitive Edge. They're experts in complexity theory, and they are developing a meeting school course that goes into all kinds of detail on how to run this particular one. So I will put a link to it in the follow-up notes in case you want to dig into it, but otherwise just stay tuned because this one's useful, but it's also pretty complicated, and we'll share that one later. The last one we're going to talk about is Troika, and we're going to practice it. So Troika consulting is a liberating structure. And like the Luma round robin and like ritual dissent, it involves small groups of people coming together to give each other feedback and advice on a proposal. The way it works is this. So first, everybody gets 1 minute to reflect on a question individually. So I hope you're ready to reflect on a question individually because your 1 minute's coming. Then we're going to break into groups of 3. And in each group of 3, one person will act as the client, and 2 of you will take the role as a consultant. We'll do 3 rounds so everybody will get a chance to play all of those roles. For the first 2 minutes of your round, the client shares their ideas. Here's what I'm thinking about my challenge. Then you get, in the official Troika consulting, you get 2 minutes to ask clarifying questions. And then the client turns their back to the group if you're in person, or you turn off your video if you've got your video on. And the consultants talk about what they've heard and their ideas for the client, ways the client might address their challenge for 4 minutes. At the end of 4 minutes, the client turns back around and shares what they liked and what they heard. And then you switch to the next person and you repeat. So for our purposes, we're going to shorten this so we can fit it all in and do 3 rounds because that won't all fit for us.
And can I ask a question real quick?
Please do.
So when this technique is being used, is this something that teams use and they play the roles, or is it actually used with the actual client?
This is internal. It's client teams. Yeah. So, or I mean, internal teams. Yeah, it's peer consulting. It's often used in training, used in workshops, used in sort of prototyping situations. And you can also use it as part of a sense-making or a problem-solving meeting. So a meeting where you're like, hey, I'm trying to get a handle on our programs. Let's each of us write down one way we might get to this program and then do some workshopping, basically, on those ideas. So for our purposes today, here is your prompt, and I'd like everybody to take 1 minute to just think about one challenge with your meetings that you'd like to overcome because it's holding either you or your team back. And this does not need to be a challenge related to feedback. It could be anything. This is all yours. So 1 minute starting now.
Allison, could you put the slide back up? Or put the question in the chat box?
Yes, absolutely. And I stuck the slides in the chat as well.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So that's it. Now we're gonna break into groups of 3. Total time per round 7 minutes. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Zoom breakout things to send you facilitator prompts. When you get into your breakout group, quickly decide who will be the first client. And then for 2 minutes, that client will share their challenge. 1 minute, the consultants will ask any questions they have. And then for 4 minutes, the client turns off their video and listens as the consultants generate great ideas for the client. Okay. And then we'll do this. I'll prompt you for each subsequent group and we'll move on from there. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. So we are going to do some breakout rooms. And one of them will be a little shy on participants because Rachel, I don't know how to get you into a breakout room. All right, and actually,
it won't let me run when I try to join the meeting. I have to join in the browser. I don't know if that happens to anyone else.
I don't think it does. It looks like everybody else is here, but we're going to get everybody else started. On your mark, get set, go. So the other group is on their final round. Rachel had the opportunity to just talk to me. Do you guys want to share a little bit about what that was like for you? Because you also just had a chance to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think Tom went first. He was the client presenting the challenge. And on a technical level, I think running timers to keep me on my 1 minute, 2 minute, 2 minute sections would be very useful.
Did you guys see the messages I was broadcasting? Did you see those? Like, hey, client, do this. Hey, you do that.
I saw like 1 or 2. I did see like client, like start a new, like switch to a new one. I saw those, but I didn't see any other timing messages. I don't know if Tom did or not. But it was just the 2 of us, so we also had a good in-depth reciprocal conversation about things. And I could see I didn't feel like that we process-wise followed it to the T and made a home run out of the process. But I will say that the idea of stopping and listening, do your thing, and then it's very good technique to alternate and to not speak at the same time and to listen with attention.
I liked it. Same thing. I saw a little bit of the message dialogue that you were giving to us, Elise, but John and I were just having too much fun talking, so we couldn't pay total attention to that. But we were also trying to fall into the roles of making sure that okay, we're going to listen. Then I'm going to ask a couple clarifying questions, and then I'm going to try to offer some value back.
Address this
cool.
particular issue, but
I got something out of it.
That jumped out at me was Ted saying, we finish up.
And Rachel, how about for you? I'm going to bring everybody back in another. They've got another 2 minutes. 1 minute. No, 2 minutes.
Sure.
They got 2 minutes. So I'm going to give them a 2-minute warning.
I think that would be an interesting
Great.
experiment. to
Yeah,
explore.
actually, I did get quite a bit out of it also. I was talking about the fact that there's a lot of random people who are coming on to meetings that I'm having, and the conversation about it really helped me reframe kind of how I was thinking about things, and did give me some new ideas for how to approach this. And let's see, it was helpful to have like one specific little thing that's been going on, but it's not all that disruptive, right? But it's a little, if I'm running a call and somebody's on there and I don't know who they are and what their role is, it makes me a little apprehensive and confused about how am I meeting their needs. So it was helpful to talk that through. I think doing this in the groups of 3 would be really interesting, with the listening to 2 other people talk about things and bounce ideas off of each other.
Well, hopefully that was the case, and the rest of the folks will join us in 46 seconds. And we will get to hear from them what their experience was like, having multiple voices talking with them.
Yeah, I mean, on a not a processing, but on a specific get. I was talking to Tom about how it switches when we're meeting internally, then we meet with an outside client, and they don't necessarily meet with the same sort of meeting effectiveness awareness that we practice or preach every day. So there's a challenge of calibrating to our outside audiences. And what Tom was basically reminding me of was establishing ground rules even with your external participants about how these work, as well as your internal participants, and how effective that can be. So,
hey everybody, welcome back. So we were an uneven number, and poor Rachel can't do breakouts, can't do video. So Rachel and John and Tom and I have come back a little early and started to talk about our experiences with that, including some technically all those prompts were not coming through quite as easily as we'd like. So that's a technical learning that I would love to hear from the 3 of you, and then Rachel, Tom, and John, if you want to add in. What did you notice about that technique and practicing that?
Are you asking someone specific? Is anyone?
Your crew.
Amy,
our crew. Okay.
Trisha or Ted.
Sure, I'm happy to talk a little bit about. Well, I could tell what we talked about, but I would say that what I found interesting was different perspectives on the same challenge. That was pretty cool.
Cool. Amy or Ted, anything that you noticed in that experience?
Yeah, I've never put myself into a situation like this where I can learn about these different meeting items, things that I can consider, because I'm more or less stuck in a record when it comes to our meetings, and this Troika is a way for the internal team to actually prepare, and I can get a sense for their challenges. And we can use this methodology to try to make our meetings more meaningful, to come up with more solutions and ideas. And I could see this just as we broke out with 3 people, doing this with the team together in our conference room and preparing for future meetings this way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's perfect, because that is the second question, is where in your work, and Amy, what was your experience, and where in your work might you use this?
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me was just that, with repetition, we became much smoother at doing, providing the feedback, and I could see where we would have gotten a lot deeper with a few more minutes. So mostly not specific to this, just generally, taking a technique and doing it a few times
Mm-hmm.
really makes a difference with your comfort level with it.
Yeah.
And you guys got to experience that in a way that the rest of us didn't because of our uneven numbers in tech. But yeah, Ted talked about one place where he might use that. Does anybody else have a place where they might use this technique?
I actually think this is great for getting feedback from people who are not directly involved in your situation. Community practice like this, or, I'm kind of blanking on other groups, but, often we have an opportunity to network with people who are doing similar kinds of work, but in separate teams.
Mm-hmm.
And, I got some ideas from Ted, for example, that, we have not worked together before and were fresh to me.
Right.
In a way that within your own group, you maybe sometimes feel that you've tried all the things and this is as good as it's going to get.
Yep. Perspectives.
Yeah, I think it was, there we go. I think it was, we have a little echo feedback here because you've got two mics in the room. Potentially a really good approach to use for a leader who may often be in a like a power position in the meeting just by default of positional role in organization, to step back a little bit for people to, because what it does is it has a person bring something and then explicitly hand the baton, the speaking monkey, to the team, the thinking and the speaking and the dialogue. So you've made an explicit, like I'm yielding the thinking to you guys for a while. You find people, not always guys, but so I think it's an equalizer in some ways, as well as effective in that way.
Excellent. And Rachel was talking during our time together about a meeting that she has that's bringing all kinds of folks from different departments or groups together, so that, not necessarily the same, kind of on the same team, but not really. So those siloed opportunities to hear from across silos are really great. So the slides are up in our here, and they'll be up in the community of practice. One thing I want to point out on that is that this particular technique, it's Troika, and Troika's 3. So it's really for little breakout groups of 3 and to rotate 3 times around with more time than we gave it today. The one that works for just one person to tell a group an idea and then get their feedback is the Accessing the Wisdom of Your Group by Paul. They're very similar constructs, but different timing, different organization of folks. So in this particular one, everybody has a challenge and everybody's a consultant. So I would love to hear more ideas and more feedback from you all, but we are getting to the end of our time. So what I would love to hear right now, and you can either do this verbally or you can put it into the chat, whichever you'd prefer, are 2 things. One, would you like to meet again in December, or shall we take a break for December? And I'm just going to throw up a poll on that one. Which is open to your voting. And then
can I just say how much I love the I feel like I learn more about using Zoom meetings every time we do one of these meetings.
Boy, tell you what, so do I. There's always something I mess up.
No, the polls, the breakouts, all the stuff. This is great.
All right, so I'm going to end this poll, and the overwhelming but not entirely confident answer is yes. So I will share those results. Thank you, Rachel. I see your note in chat. So December 17th is most likely our date, and I am open to topic suggestions. So if there's a particular area of technique you'd like to explore, let me know. In February, we're looking at managing up, so how to make meetings better when you're not in charge. And then as we exit, if you would love to share what you liked, what you learned, and what you felt this lacked, I would love to hear it. Either in chat or out loud.
Oh. I see.
What was
I can
the
go.
third question?
Liked, things that you liked, something that you're going to take away as a key learning, and something you felt the session lacked.
Okay, lacked. Thank you.
Yep.
I liked the creative, like, I feel like we're pushing the edge of the technology with Zoom and bringing together this group of interested people to talk about this topic, and doing it virtually is really awesome. I really like that. An item that lacked for me was I felt like I wasn't totally prepared, and it's probably something that I didn't do in reading the materials about the various tactics that we were going to be discussing ahead of time. So if that wasn't posted, then that was a true lacking item. If it was posted and I didn't read it, then I am the lackey. And then the third thing, the learning, I actually was reminded of something great by John that I had forgotten about, and that was the meeting maturity model that Lucid Meetings has posted publicly, I think, on their blog and talked about before. And I'm going to go back and take a look at that later. That's some great content that could probably help me.
Awesome. Awesome. Would anybody else like to share verbally?
I think that I like the breakout sessions. I like the breakout idea because I think it takes the conversation from the big to the small group, and it gives you a chance to be more interactive. And I learned / relearned the value of practicing techniques. Yeah, we talk about this all the time, but you have to do them some in a kind of a safe environment to be able to make that go. So.
All right. And there goes Trisha, which means we are at the end of our time. I will invite your feedback both in comments in the online course. I guess I'll see you all in December. And if you've got more comments or feedback or things you want more resources for on anything we talked about here today, leave us a note in the Teachable course online, which you'll get a link to afterwards. And have a fabulous month in the interim.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Bye-bye.